I had the letter in my hands before the screen door even closed. After 3 years, I whispered, she wrote. I slid a thumb under the flap, breath stuck in my chest, ready to tear it open and hear my daughter's voice on paper. Wait, Marlo said. Her tone cut through the kitchen like a blade. What's wrong? I asked. She didn't answer. She pointed. I looked closer, and what I saw made my stomach drop. The return address wasn't Juniper's at all. It was Keaton Street, the house where I used to fix the fence and grill on Sundays, the house where my daughter-in-law had once told me I was no longer welcome. My name is Harlan Pierce. I am 64. I live in a single-story ranch at the edge of Ashford, Ohio, where the cornfields press up against the last row of mailboxes like a crowd at a parade. I spent 3 decades working night shifts at the steel plant, and 2 more fighting rust with a paintbrush after the plant closed. I raised my son, Keaton, mostly alone until Marlo came into our lives when he was 15. I taught him to change oil, to hold his temper, to come back and say, I'm sorry, even when it burned. I saved for his college, for his first truck, for the little yellow bike his sister Juniper wanted so bad she cried. I believed in him the way a shore believes in a lighthouse. Then the years turned, and belief met its storm. Marlo set the letter on a kitchen towel like it might stain. See the stamp? She said. It's doubled. Someone peeled it, then stuck it back on. She showed me the soft lift at the corner, a tiny scar of glue across the flag. The envelope was addressed in Juniper's looping print, that old dance recital kind of handwriting, but the J hooked wrong, as if someone had traced it from a memory that didn't belong to them. I remembered the last time I saw my daughter's face, the day after her 27th birthday, when she left with a suitcase and more silence than words. We all said things we should not have said. The silence became a wall. The wall became 3 years. I carried the letter to the kitchen table. There, the oak had knife marks and coffee rings and one thin groove from the time Keaton practiced carving his name with a pocket knife he wasn't supposed to have. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that pushes on your ribs. A late October sun washed through the blinds, painting prison bars on the countertop. It's from Keaton Street, I said again, as if saying it twice would make it make sense. Maybe Junie is staying there. Maybe she's okay. Hope makes its own rules, and I was ready to let it. Marlo's eyes, the color of old denim, stayed hard. Harlan, be careful. Be careful. As if care could hold back a flood. I thought of Keaton's wife, Sable, with her perfect teeth and her soft voice that could turn mean without moving. At first we liked her. She called me Mr. Pierce and brought cherry pies from a bakery with labels that made my hands shake when I saw the prices. She had plans for everything. She planned how Keaton's friends should be better for him. She planned how holidays should rotate fairly, which meant we saw them less. Then she planned me right out of their lives. He needs to focus on his own family, she said. He needs boundaries. That was the word Sable used when she turned our front porch into a border crossing. Boundaries. Like I was a flood she had to dam up before I washed away her nice rugs. Juniper wouldn't write from there, Marlo said. She hasn't set foot in that house since. She didn't finish. We both remembered. The last fight. The phone slammed down. Sable's message to me, through Keaton, don't interfere. Let us parent. As if I hadn't parented my whole life. As if loving too much can be a crime, and the penalty is distance. I took the letter in both hands like a relic. On the back flap, just under the seal, there was a faint press mark, a single dent in the paper, like the tip of a pen had hesitated there. We used to have a family code when the kids were small. 3 dots on the corner meant urgent. A little star meant surprise. This was neither. It was a single dot. A pause. A breath. A warning. My thumb traced the dent. What if something's wrong? I said. What if Junie needs me? Need had been my job since the day Keaton's mama left. He was 6 then. He watched the door as if it would apologize and open again. I became father, mother, neighbor, mechanic, tutor, cook, and whatever else the day demanded. We ate tomato soup and cheese toast and laughed at sitcoms with the volume too low. I taught him to listen to the weather in his bones. I told him the truth even when it hurt me. I told him love stays. When he grew and wanted to pull away, I tried to let him. I did not always succeed. A parent is rope and anchor and knife all at once, and some days you are not sure which one your child needs most. Marlo slid a pair of nitrile gloves from the drawer. She used them when she cleaned with bleach or dyed her hair in the sink. Humor me, she said. We don't know what Sable plays at. You think she'd send? I could not finish it. Powder. Threat. A trick. It sounded paranoid in my mouth, but Marlowe had watched too many small cruelties grow into big ones. She eased the envelope onto the towel and tapped the edges. Nothing poured out. No powder, no glint of a blade. Just paper and hush and the tick of the stove clock. Outside, a wind rattled the dry corn, 1,000 tiny voices saying wait. If it's from Keaton Street, I said, then he knows. The thought felt like a nail. If Keaton knew, then he let it happen. Or he made it happen. I thought of the last time I saw my son. He stood at the end of our driveway in a crisp shirt I paid for, with a face I knew better than my own, and told me not to come by unannounced. We have a system now, he said, like our lives were a storage locker. His words were Sable's words, but they were in his mouth. He did not look at me when he said them. He looked over my shoulder, at the field, at anything else. I said I understood. I did not. I drove home and sat in the truck until the sky turned black and the cold told me to go inside. I told myself it would pass. It did not pass. It settled, like dust, into everything. The kettle clicked off. The letter sat between us like a test we had not studied for. If Junie wrote it, Marlowe said, it's a cry for help. If she didn't, it was a hook set by someone who wanted to watch me bleed. I picked up the letter opener, a little brass knife shaped like a swallow. It was a gift from Juniper when she was 12, bought with lawn mowing money and wrapped in tissue paper she decorated herself. The swallow's beak slid under the flap, slow, careful, the way a person moves through a room after an argument. The phone began to ring. An unknown number. The first ring froze me. The second ring turned my hand to ice. On the third ring, Marlowe reached for the phone, and the brass beak met glue. Put it on speaker, I said. The line clicked. A voice I did not recognize, calm and thin as a hospital hallway, said, Mr. Pierce, please do not open that letter. My hand stopped. The swallow's beak rested in the seam like a held breath. Who is this? I asked. The voice gave a name that meant nothing to me, then a place that did, Willow County Rehabilitation Center. I closed my eyes for half a second, and in that small dark I saw my son's face, and my daughter's handwriting, and Marlowe's finger pointing at the stamp that did not belong. Please, the voice said, and the kitchen seemed to lean closer to hear it. If you open it, you may not forgive what you find. I pressed the brass edge down anyway. The blade tore through the paper with a whisper. Inside was a single folded sheet and a photograph. Marlowe gasped first. It wasn't a recent picture. It was one I had never seen, but I recognized the setting. My old house. The one I sold to pay Keaton's debts after he lost his job. In the photograph, Juniper stood beside a woman who looked like Sable, only thinner, colder. And Juniper's eyes, they were swollen, red, afraid. Behind them, through the living room window, my old rocking chair sat empty. On the back of the photo, in faint pencil, was a message. Dad, please don't call. Just come alone. Thursday, 8 p.m. The letter itself was short, written in Juniper's hand, but the tremble in her pen told me something was wrong. I'm sorry for disappearing. I thought it was the only way to protect you. They don't know I'm writing this. Please, Dad, don't trust Keaton. He isn't who you think he is. Marlowe covered her mouth. It can't be real, she whispered. But I knew my daughter's handwriting like I knew my own heartbeat. The loops in her Y's, the soft tilt to the right. It was her. The voice from the phone still echoed in my head. Don't open it. I looked at Marlowe, then at the letter again. I have to find her. She reached for my hand. Harlan, stop. This could be a setup. Think. You haven't seen her in 3 years, and suddenly this letter shows up from Keaton's address? It doesn't make sense. But I couldn't stop. My hands shook as I folded the letter and slid it into my jacket pocket. Memories began to flood back. How we had gotten here, to this quiet kitchen full of fear. It started years ago, long before Juniper vanished. When Keaton met Sable, she was everything I wasn't. Educated, sharp, ambitious. I tried to like her. I really did. She came from money and never let anyone forget it. The first time she visited our house, she smiled at the old furniture like it was a museum exhibit. So rustic, she said. It's like something from a country movie. I laughed it off, but the look in her eyes told me she wasn't joking. At their wedding, I gave a speech about family, about sticking together through the worst. Keaton smiled, but Sable's jaw tightened. Later that night, she pulled me aside. You don't have to keep reminding him of the past, she said. He's not a little boy anymore. I thought she was nervous, protective. I didn't realize she was already drawing lines. 2 years later, Juniper left for college, and the house became too quiet. Keaton stopped visiting. He said work was busy, then that the kids were sick, then that it was complicated. The last time I drove out there, Sable met me on the porch with folded arms. Keaton isn't home, she said, though I could see his car in the driveway. You need to call before you come. After that, things spiraled. My savings gone. The retirement fund I had built for Marlowe and me, emptied. Keaton had borrowed against my name, used my trust to cover a business venture Sable had pushed him into. When I confronted him, he didn't even look ashamed. Dad, I'll fix it, he said. But he never did. Instead, they cut us off. Then Juniper stopped answering calls. At first, I thought she was angry about the fight between her brother and me. But months turned into years, and no word came. Not a text, not an email. Just silence. I told myself she was busy, that she needed space, but every night I checked the mailbox anyway. Until today. Now the silence had broken, and it sounded like a cry for help. Marlowe followed me as I grabbed my truck keys. You can't just drive there, Harlan. It could be dangerous. I raised both of them, I said. I built that house with my own hands. If something's happening in there, I need to see it. She stepped in front of me. Then I'm coming. I shook my head. The letter said alone. She hesitated. Then at least let me call Sheriff Denton. He'll listen. But I couldn't risk it. If Juniper was in trouble, calling the police might make it worse. I kissed Marlowe's forehead, her tears hot against my lips. Lock the doors. I'll be back before midnight. The drive to Keaton Street took 30 minutes, but it felt like I was crossing years. Every mailbox, every rusted sign looked like a ghost of something I used to know. When I pulled up outside his house, the porch light was off, but I could see movement inside, shadows shifting against the curtains. Then, a faint glow in the upstairs window. A silhouette, a hand pressed against the glass. It was Juniper. My chest tightened. I stepped out of the truck. The air was cold enough to bite, but my hands were sweating. A creak came from the side gate. Someone was there. Harlan, a voice said softly. It wasn't Keaton's. It wasn't Juniper's. It was lower, older. I turned toward the voice, heart hammering. Who's there? The figure stepped forward, half lit by the moon. I recognized the uniform before I recognized the face. Willow County Rehabilitation Center. The same name from the phone call. You shouldn't be here, the man said. She's not safe in that house. I took a step closer. Who are you? He looked around nervously, then whispered. I'm her nurse. But you need to understand, your son isn't the victim. The man glanced toward the house, then back at me. If you want to save your daughter, you have to come with me. Right now. He reached out his hand. I hesitated, staring between him and the window where Juniper's shadow had vanished. Then, from inside the house, a light flicked on, and Keaton's voice echoed through the night, sharp, angry, and directed right at me. Dad, what the hell are you doing here? The porch light flicked on, burning through the dark like an accusation. Keaton stood at the doorway in his flannel shirt, the same one I'd given him last Christmas before he stopped returning calls. His hair was shorter now, streaked with gray, and there was a tension in his face I hadn't seen before, something between anger and fear. Dad, he said, voice tight. What are you doing here? I froze halfway up the path. The man from the rehab center melted back into the shadows, giving me a warning glance before disappearing behind the neighbor's hedge. My heart thudded. I came because of Juniper, I said. Keaton's eyes narrowed. Juniper? What about her? I held up the envelope. She sent me a letter. Said she needed help. For a split second, he looked confused. Then his face hardened. That's impossible. She's upstairs, I said. I saw her in the window. Keaton stepped out onto the porch, his expression unreadable. Dad, you need to go home. I'm not leaving until I see her. His jaw tightened. You don't understand. She's not. He stopped himself, glanced behind him, then back at me. Just please, don't make this worse. Marlowe's voice rang in my head. Be careful. I took another step forward. Worse than what, Keaton? Tell me where my daughter is. The door opened wider, and Sable appeared. Wearing a silk robe like this was all a minor inconvenience. Her voice was syrupy and sharp all at once. Mr. Pierce, she said, with that same fake smile she'd always used when she wanted to end a conversation. It's late. You shouldn't be here. I'm here for Juniper, I said. I know she's inside. Sable's smile didn't falter, but her eyes did something, darted, just for a second, toward the stairs behind her. Then she crossed her arms. Juniper isn't here. You've been misled. Maybe someone's playing a cruel joke. I saw her in the window, I insisted. Keaton rubbed his temples. Dad, please. You're not helping anyone by showing up like this. Anger rose in me, sharp and bitter. Helping? I raised you with nothing but my hands and hope, and now you tell me I'm not helping. My voice broke. If your sister's in trouble, I have a right to know. Sable sighed, feigning pity. You always did have a flair for drama. Why don't you come inside for a minute? We'll talk this through. The way she said it, too sweet, too controlled, made every alarm bell in my head go off. Still, I followed them in. The house smelled like bleach and perfume. Everything looked too perfect. White walls, matching furniture, framed certificates of success. But there were no family photos. Not one of Keaton and Juniper, not even the old wedding picture. The place felt hollow. Keaton gestured toward the couch. Sit, Dad. I stayed standing. Where's Juniper? He rubbed his neck, avoiding my eyes. She's not well. My stomach dropped. Not well? What do you mean? Sable sat beside him, resting a hand on his knee like she was the one holding him together. She's been in treatment, she said softly. At Willow County Rehabilitation. She's been struggling with things. We didn't want to worry you. The words hit me like a slap. Willow County. The same name from the call. The same uniform that man outside had been wearing. That's a lie, I said. She wrote me from this address. Keaton's face turned red. No, she didn't. She did. I threw the envelope onto the coffee table. Her handwriting. Her words. She said not to trust you. Sable picked up the letter, skimmed it with a smirk. Oh, this. She folded it neatly. Juniper didn't write this. Someone's playing tricks. But she said it too quickly. And when she handed it back, her hand trembled just slightly. You think I don't know my own daughter's handwriting? I said. Dad. Keaton began, his voice shaking. You need to stop before you make things worse for everyone. Worse. I snapped. She's asking for help. What have you done to her? Sable's smile vanished. Enough. She stood, her tone suddenly ice cold. Juniper is safe. You need to leave before I call someone to remove you. And then, from upstairs, a faint noise. A creak, like footsteps. All three of us froze. Sable's face went pale. Keaton, she whispered, stay here. But I was already moving toward the stairs. Harlan, don't. Keaton shouted, grabbing my arm. I shoved him off, harder than I meant to. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight as I climbed. Each step felt like it was pulling me deeper into the past. I could feel Sable's eyes burning into my back, hear Keaton's muffled pleading. But all I saw was that shadow in the window. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched ahead, 3 doors, all closed. The house was too quiet now, like it was holding its breath. Then, from the last door on the right, a voice. Dad. It was soft, trembling, but it was her. Juniper. I whispered, stepping closer. Behind me, Keaton yelled, don't open that door. But my hand was already on the knob. And when I turned it, the door swung open. And the room inside wasn't what I expected at all. There were no lights. No furniture. Just a hospital bed bolted to the floor, medical monitors blinking in the dark, and the smell of antiseptic thick in the air. And in that bed, pale and thin as a ghost, was my daughter. Her eyes fluttered open. Dad, she whispered again. They lied to you. Behind me, footsteps thundered up the stairs. Keaton's voice cracked through the darkness. Dad, stop. You don't understand. I turned to face him, fury burning through every vein. Then make me understand, I said. But he didn't answer. Because at that moment, Sable appeared behind him, holding something in her hand. Something small, metallic, and glinting under the hallway light. A syringe, filled with something dark. And she was heading straight for Juniper's bed. Don't touch her, I warned. The words tore out of me raw and deep, the kind that scraped the lungs on their way out. I lunged forward, but Keaton grabbed my arm, pulling me back with more strength than I remembered him having. Dad, stop. You don't know what you're doing. Then tell me, I shouted, shoving him off. Tell me why your wife is holding a needle over your sister. Sable froze by the bed, her expression unreadable. The syringe trembled in her hand, catching the weak glow of the monitor light. It's medicine, she said smoothly. Sedative. She's unstable. The doctor said. Doctor. I cut her off, stepping closer. What doctor keeps a patient in a locked bedroom instead of a hospital? Keaton ran a hand through his hair, breathing hard. You don't understand, Dad. Juniper's been different. She hurts herself. She sees things that aren't there. She sees you, I said, voice low. And that's enough to make anyone sick. The words hit him hard. He flinched. But Sable didn't flinch. Her smile crept back, small and cold. She wrote me, I said, turning to Juniper. You remember, sweetheart? The letter you sent? I got it. Juniper's lips moved, barely audible. I didn't send it. The air left my chest. What? Her eyes, sunken, frightened, looked past me, to Keaton. He took my phone. My mail. Everything. Keaton's face twisted. That's not true. But she kept talking, voice trembling, words rushing like she'd been waiting years to release them. She made me sign papers. Said it was for medical consent. But it wasn't. She coughed, weak and dry. They took the money you left for me, Dad. The trust fund. She transferred it. Sable's hand clenched tighter around the syringe. She's delusional, she hissed. I stepped between her and the bed. Put it down. Her eyes glimmered like glass under pressure. Do you really think you can fix this, Harlan? You couldn't even hold your family together. You couldn't keep your wife, your job, your son. You think you're going to play hero now? Something inside me snapped. The years of silence, the long nights alone, the memory of my boy telling me I was too much. I didn't feel 64 then. I felt like the man who used to lift beams at the plant with bare hands and hold babies without fear. Put it down. Sable hesitated, her fingers twitching. The syringe wavered. For a moment, I thought she might listen. But then Keaton moved. He stepped forward quickly, reaching to grab her wrist. Sable, give it here. She jerked away, shouting, Don't touch me. The syringe flew from her grip. It hit the floor, rolled beneath the bed, the needle clinking against metal. In the same breath, Juniper gasped, a small, terrified sound, and her monitor started to beep. Fast. Too fast. Call someone. I yelled. Keaton stumbled toward the dresser, fumbling for his phone. Dad. I didn't know she was this bad. I turned back to Juniper. Her hand reached for mine, cold and trembling. I didn't send it, she whispered again. It wasn't me. I squeezed her fingers. Then who did? Her lips parted, but no sound came. Just tears. And then, footsteps on the stairs. Slow, heavy. The same man from outside appeared in the doorway, his uniform shadowed in the dim light. I told you not to open it, he said. Keaton froze. Who the hell are you? The man stepped forward, pulling a badge from his pocket. Detective Owen Grant, Willow County Sheriff's Department. And you, he said, looking straight at Sable, are under investigation for fraud, identity theft, and unlawful confinement. Sable's mouth opened, but no words came. Her control cracked in an instant. What is this? Keaton demanded. Why are you in my house? The detective ignored him, kneeling beside Juniper's bed. Ma'am, you're safe now. We've got medical on the way. He turned to me. Mr. Pierce, I'm sorry. We've been building this case for months. Your daughter's letter wasn't from her. It was from an informant at the facility. They knew something was wrong here, but couldn't reach her safely. My head swam. You mean, this was all a setup? To catch them? Partly, Grant said. But Juniper really was in danger. He looked at Sable, whose calm had shattered entirely. We traced forged documents back to her. Your daughter's signatures on false withdrawals, fake medical authorizations. She's been moving funds through a shell account for 2 years. Keaton sank to his knees. No, that can't be true. Sable turned on him, eyes wild. You think I did this alone? You signed the papers, Keaton. You wanted the money just as much as I did. He stared at her like she'd just spoken another language. You told me it was for treatment, he whispered. Grant's voice cut through the chaos. Everything's recorded. You'll both have your chance to talk downtown. I stood frozen, watching my son crumble. The boy who used to sit on my shoulders and call me hero was now a man kneeling in the wreckage of everything I'd built. Paramedics rushed in, voices sharp and professional, filling the silence. They lifted Juniper gently, wrapping her in a blanket. She reached out for me as they wheeled her away. Don't leave me, Dad. I won't, I said. Not ever again. As the stretcher disappeared down the stairs, the detective touched my shoulder. She'll be okay, he said quietly. You did the right thing coming here. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man who had watched his family rot from the inside and only now realized how deep the poison went. They led Sable and Keaton out in handcuffs. Sable kept her chin high, defiant to the end. Keaton, though, he wouldn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the ground, tears streaking his cheeks. As they passed, I whispered, "You can still choose better, son." He didn't answer. When the house finally emptied, I stood alone in the hallway, the faint beep of Juniper's monitors still echoing in my ears. The walls seemed to breathe, exhaling years of secrets into the night. I picked up the fallen syringe and set it on the dresser. The label caught my eye, something scrawled in faint ink across the side. It wasn't medicine. It was labeled Sample C, Trial Serum. Not hospital stock. Not legal. And suddenly, the pieces shifted again. The detective had said fraud, confinement, identity theft. But this was something else. Something deeper. And if Sable had been using experimental drugs on my daughter, then this story wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't sleep that night. The flashing red lights from the ambulance still painted the front of the house long after everyone was gone. The walls were silent now, but my heart wasn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that syringe, the label, Trial Serum. The words looped in my head like a broken record. The next morning, I drove straight to Willow County Hospital. They had taken Juniper there overnight, and I wasn't going to let anyone else near her until I got answers. The nurse at the reception desk looked up as I approached. Name: Harlan Pierce. My daughter, Juniper Pierce, was brought in last night. She checked her screen, then nodded. Room 214. She's stable, but still under observation. Detective Grant left instructions that you could visit. Stable. It was a small word, but it felt like oxygen. When I walked into her room, the light was soft, and the air smelled clean. Juniper lay propped up on pillows, color slowly returning to her cheeks. The machines beside her hummed quietly. "Hey, sweetheart," I said. Her eyes fluttered open, and she smiled faintly. "You came." "Of course I did." I sat beside her bed and took her hand. It felt warmer than the night before. "How are you feeling?" She hesitated. "Better, I think. They said I'd been drugged for weeks. Some of the things I remember, they don't feel real anymore." "It's over now," I said gently. "Sable and Keaton, they're in custody. You're safe." She shook her head weakly. "You don't understand, Dad. It's not just them." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She swallowed hard. Sable wasn't working alone. She was part of something bigger. Some medical group. They called it the Eden Study. She said they were testing new memory treatments. They paid her to help recruit patients, people who wouldn't be missed. She told me it was a temporary research stay. Then she took my phone, my ID, everything. I leaned closer. "What kind of treatment?" Juniper's voice trembled. "They said it could erase trauma, rewrite memories. But the people she brought in, they didn't come out the same. Some forgot who they were. Some never woke up." The room seemed to shrink around me. "And Keaton knew?" Tears slid down her cheeks. "He said he didn't. But he signed everything she put in front of him. He thought it was just money for her medical business. He didn't ask questions." I sat back, trying to steady my breathing. Eden Study. It sounded innocent, biblical even, but now it felt like poison. Before I could ask more, there was a knock on the door. Detective Grant stepped in, a folder tucked under his arm. He looked tired, but focused. "Morning, Mr. Pierce." "Miss Pierce." He nodded at Juniper. "You look stronger today." Juniper gave a faint smile. "A little." Grant pulled up a chair. "Mr. Pierce, we ran the serial number on that syringe you found. You were right, it wasn't hospital stock. It's linked to a private lab in Cincinnati. The same one that's been funding Sable's so-called wellness clinic for the past 2 years." I clenched my fists. "So she's been experimenting on people?" Grant nodded grimly. "Unlicensed neurochemical research. It's part of a larger investigation. We've been tracking the Eden Project for months, but we didn't know it reached this far into residential areas." I felt my pulse quicken. "Are you saying my daughter was a test subject?" "She was," Grant said, "but not a voluntary one." Juniper turned her face away, ashamed, as if she'd done something wrong. I reached over and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "None of this is your fault," I said softly. "You were brave to survive it." Grant leaned forward. "Mr. Pierce, I need your help. We found financial records showing that your retirement fund and Juniper's trust were funneled through a shell company connected to this lab. We need someone who knew Keaton and Sable's habits, someone who can help us trace how far this goes." I stared at him. You're asking me to go after my own son. I'm asking you to help stop whatever's left of this operation, Grant said quietly. We think Keaton might have information that could expose the others, but he's refusing to talk unless you're there. Juniper gripped my hand. Dad, don't. But I already knew I would. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed peace. For Juniper. For the years I'd lost. When do we do this? I asked. Grant opened his folder. Tonight. At the county jail. He's agreed to a meeting. I nodded. I'll be there. After the detective left, I stayed with Juniper a while longer. The sun climbed higher through the blinds, warming the room. For the first time in years, I felt something close to hope. But beneath it, a deeper ache lingered. The kind that comes from realizing that love doesn't die. It just learns to hide behind disappointment. Before I left, Juniper squeezed my hand. Be careful, Dad. Sable might be in custody, but she's smart. If she was working with those people, they won't stop just because she's gone. I nodded. Then they'll learn what happens when you push a man too far. That night, I drove to the county jail under a bruised sky. The air was thick with the promise of rain. When I entered the visitation room, Keaton was already there, sitting behind the glass. His face was drawn, eyes hollow. He picked up the phone slowly. Dad, he said. Son, I replied. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavier than the bars between us. Finally, Keaton exhaled. They told me about the Eden Project. About what Sable did. I swear I didn't know. But I signed things. I didn't ask questions. I just wanted her to be proud of me. I closed my eyes. You didn't just lose her, Keaton. You lost yourself. His voice cracked. Can I fix it? Maybe not for her, I said. But for your sister, you can try. He looked down, shame pulling at his shoulders. They're coming for me, aren't they? The people she worked with. Who? He glanced up, eyes wide. You don't understand, Dad. Sable wasn't the leader. She was the recruiter. The real one, he's still out there. He knows you found the serum. The phone line hissed with static, like the air itself held its breath. Then Keaton leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. Whatever you do, don't go home tonight. The line went dead, and through the glass, I saw the fear in my son's eyes. Fear not of prison, but of something far worse. When I stepped outside the jail, the night had turned thick with rain. The kind that didn't fall, but pressed down like a weight. The parking lot lights flickered, and every sound felt sharper. The echo of my boots, the hiss of water sliding through the drains, the hum of distant thunder. Keaton's words looped in my head. Don't go home tonight. I gripped my steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. He wasn't lying. That same fear I saw in him, raw, stripped down, animal, was real. And if he was scared, it meant something was still moving in the shadows Sable had crawled out of. I started the truck, wipers slapping hard against the windshield. My first instinct was to drive straight to Juniper's hospital room, but the rational part of me knew that would put her in danger too. If they were watching me, they'd expect me to go to her. Instead, I turned onto Route 39, heading away from Ashford. The highway stretched dark and empty, flanked by fields that looked like oceans of black glass. I drove until the sign for Cedar Hollow Motel appeared out of the rain. The kind of place where nobody asked questions and everyone looked tired. Inside, the clerk barely looked up from his television. One room, king or double. Doesn't matter, I muttered. Cash. The room smelled like old coffee and damp carpet, but the lock worked. I closed the curtains and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the folded copy of the police report Grant had given me earlier. My eyes drifted over Sable's name, the list of charges, the mention of the Eden Project. No addresses, no board members, just layers of shell companies, like ghosts hiding behind mirrors. I pulled out my old phone and dialed Grant's number. He picked up on the second ring. Pierce, he said, voice weary. Keaton told me not to go home tonight. There was a pause. What do you mean? He said they're coming for him. For me. That Sable wasn't the head of it. Someone else is pulling the strings. Grant exhaled sharply. That tracks with what we've found. The lab in Cincinnati isn't independent. There's a parent entity, something called Elysian Biosolutions. Private investors. Most of the paperwork sealed. Then unseal it, I said. He hesitated. Mr. Pierce, listen. You've already done more than enough. Stay somewhere safe. We'll handle the rest. I've been staying safe my whole life, I said. And look what that got my family. Before he could answer, a sound came from outside, the crunch of tires on gravel. Slow. Deliberate. I killed the light. The headlights stopped just beyond my window. Through a slit in the curtain, I saw a black SUV, engine idling. The kind of car that didn't belong in places like this. Two figures sat inside. One got out, umbrella in hand. The other stayed behind the wheel. I whispered into the phone, "They found me." Grant's tone changed instantly. "Stay inside. Lock the door. I'm sending units now." But before he could say more, the line went dead. The motel's phone light blinked once, then went dark too. The power had been cut. I slipped my truck keys into my pocket and reached for the small revolver I kept locked in the glove box, a habit from years working late shifts near the city. The metal was cold in my hand, heavy with history. The doorknob rattled once. Then again, harder. "Mr. Pierce," a voice said through the rain. "Calm. Too calm. We just want to talk." "Sure you do," I muttered under my breath. The doorframe shuddered under a single hard kick. Splinters rained onto the floor. I backed toward the bathroom, every sense screaming. The second kick nearly broke the lock. And then headlights cut across the lot. Two more vehicles pulling in fast. Sirens flared behind them. Red and blue flashed through the curtains. The pounding stopped. The man outside cursed under his breath, then turned back toward his SUV. It screeched out of the lot, tires spitting gravel, just as a county cruiser swung into view. I lowered the gun, breathing hard. Grant stepped out of the lead car, trench coat plastered to his shoulders. "You all right?" he called. "Yeah," I said. "Just another night in paradise." He looked toward the disappearing taillights. Whoever they were, they moved like pros. "We'll get the plates." "They weren't here to talk," I said. He nodded grimly. "No, they were here to erase." Grant led me to the cruiser. Inside, he opened his laptop and turned the screen toward me. A still image, grainy, from a security camera, showed the black SUV leaving a gated facility earlier that evening. The sign on the gate read, "Elysian Biosolutions Research Campus." "Recognize it?" he asked. I stared. The building in the background wasn't in Cincinnati. I knew that brickwork. That old, slanted roof. "That's in Ashford," I said. "That used to be the steel plant." Grant's jaw tightened. "They repurposed it 2 years ago under a government subsidy. Claimed they were developing sustainable medical materials." A bitter laugh escaped me. "They're building monsters instead." He looked at me seriously. "If they've converted that site, it might still hold records, or worse, patients." "Then that's where we go," I said. "Mr. Pierce." "Detective," I interrupted. "You've been chasing this from the outside. But I built that plant. I know every hallway, every tunnel, every emergency exit. If someone's still in there, we don't wait for a warrant." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "We move at dawn." I leaned back in the seat, exhausted but burning inside. Through the rain-streaked window, the motel sign flickered weakly, half-lit letters spelling out hollow. It felt right. Because that was what I'd become, a hollow shell filled with rage and regret, ready to be filled with something new. Vengeance wasn't what I wanted anymore. I wanted truth. And when morning came, I was going to walk back into that factory and tear the truth out by its roots, even if it killed me. The dawn broke pale and bruised, the sky the color of old ash. I stood in the parking lot of the Cedar Hollow Motel with a thermos of burnt coffee in one hand and my revolver tucked in my coat pocket. Detective Grant pulled up in an unmarked sedan, engine still idling. "You sure about this, Pierce?" he asked. "Not even a little," I said, climbing in. "But I'm done watching from the sidelines." The drive to the old steel plant felt like a funeral procession. I hadn't been back there since it shut down 20 years ago. The road was cracked and overgrown, weeds crawling over rusted signs that still bore the company name, Ashford Iron Works. I'd spent half my life there, sweat, burns, and laughter all mixed into the walls. Now it was the home of something darker. When we arrived, the main gates hung crooked, chains looped through them, but not locked. Grant killed the engine. The air was thick with fog, curling over the fences like breath. "This is it," I said quietly. "They used to pour steel where that new building stands. The main furnace pits underneath." Grant checked his pistol. "Let's move." We slipped through the gap in the gate. The place was eerily quiet. Rows of prefab structures lined the courtyard. White panels, blue logos. Elysian Biosolutions. Each one looked identical, clinical, out of place against the decaying brick of the old factory. We reached the main building. Grant used a small pry bar to lift the latch on a side door. Inside, Fluorescent lights flickered. The smell hit me first, antiseptic and metal. The old factory floor had been gutted. Where molten steel once flowed, there were rows of hospital beds now. Machines lined the walls, humming quietly. But the beds weren't empty. Figures lay beneath thin sheets, hooked up to IVs and monitors. Their faces were pale, some motionless, others twitching faintly as if trapped in dreams. "Dear God," Grant whispered. I walked to the nearest bed. A young man, maybe 25, lay still. A tag on his wrist read Subject 204, Cognitive Reassignment Trial. His hair was buzzed short, his lips moving soundlessly. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. Grant took out his phone, snapping photos. "It's a live testing site. They're running unapproved neural serums." The Eden Project was just the beginning. I turned toward the far wall. A faint buzzing came from behind a locked door marked Authorized Personnel Only. I didn't wait for permission. I kicked it open. The room beyond was smaller, colder. A control center, screens lined up on one wall, each showing brainwave charts, video feeds of the patients, and one screen labeled Subject Alpha. I stepped closer. The camera feed showed a familiar face, Sable, sitting in a small, concrete room, her wrists bound to the arms of a chair. Electrodes on her temples. "She's here," I said. Grant cursed under his breath. They moved her out of county custody. Someone high up authorized this. Maybe to silence her. I looked at the monitor again. Sable's eyes flicked up, as if she knew we were watching. Then her lips formed words, slow, deliberate. "You're too late." Grant spun toward the console. "She's conscious. They're running a neural sync, using her data to trigger the others. If she's connected to the serum network." The lights flickered. A low hum built in the air, deep and resonant. The patients on the beds began to stir, heads rolling, eyes fluttering open. Machines beeped faster. "What's happening?" I shouted. Grant typed furiously at the terminal. "She's sending a cascade, some kind of fail-safe program. If the system shuts down, it releases a secondary dose into every subject, including Juniper. Can you stop it?" "Maybe," he said, "but I need time." Time was the one thing we didn't have. The sound grew louder, a throbbing pulse through the metal floor. I ran toward the corridor that led to Sable's room. "Harlan, wait!" Grant yelled after me, but I didn't stop. The corridor stretched long and narrow, flickering lights painting shadows that seemed to move. My footsteps echoed off the steel walls. Ahead, I could hear a faint buzzing, like static or whispering. When I reached the final door, I slammed it open. Sable looked up from the chair, electrodes still connected. She smiled faintly. "I told you not to come back here." I grabbed the cables and ripped them free. Sparks flew. "You're not taking another life, you hear me?" She laughed weakly. "You think this is about lives? This is about memory. About evolution. They'll finish what I started." Her eyes rolled back, and the machine screamed. The monitors flared with light, graphs spiking, alarms blaring. Grant's voice shouted through the intercom. "Harlan, get out of there. The system's going critical." I turned, sprinting back down the corridor. The hum turned into a roar. The walls shook. Somewhere behind me, a monitor exploded in a burst of white light. When I burst back into the main hall, Grant was pulling cables, smashing control boxes. "We've got to cut power manually," he yelled. Together we ran to the breaker unit near the entrance. Grant jammed his crowbar into the main switch and yanked it down. The light snapped off. The sound died. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. Only the distant drip of water broke it. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Grant spoke, voice low. "We stopped it. The signal's dead." I exhaled, my knees weak. "What about the patients?" He turned on his flashlight and swept the beam across the beds. One by one, the monitors blinked to life again, this time steady, slow. No alarms. Just breathing. Then he pointed the light toward the far door. "She's gone." I followed his gaze. The chair where Sable had been strapped was empty. The electrodes lay tangled on the floor. "She can't be far," Grant said. But I wasn't so sure. The exit doors hung open, rain streaming in through the morning light. Sable was out there again. Somewhere. I looked at the sleeping figures on the beds, the victims she'd left behind. My daughter among them, fighting her way back to herself. And I made a quiet promise in that cold, echoing factory. If Sable was the ghost of what my family had lost, then I'd become the storm that hunted her. Not for revenge, for redemption. Because some things a father can't forgive, but he can finish them. 3 weeks later, Ashford felt like a town waking from a bad dream. The steel plant was sealed off behind federal tape, its new name, Elysian Biosolutions, already painted over by rust and rain. People whispered about it in the diner, called it the Ghost Factory, but no one really knew what had happened inside. The official story said it was a chemical containment failure. No one mentioned the rows of stolen lives that had been hooked up like machinery. Juniper came home 2 days after the shutdown. She still moved slowly, still woke up sweating from dreams she couldn't describe, but her laughter had returned, soft and uncertain, like a song relearning its tune. I'd converted the guest room into her space. Sometimes she'd sit by the window for hours, sketching. Other times she'd just stare out at the fields, eyes unfocused. Healing has its own clock, and I wasn't about to rush it. Detective Grant stopped by one evening. The sun was bleeding out over the cornfields, throwing long shadows through the porch. He leaned on the railing, flipping through a folder. "She's gone," he said simply. "Sable?" He nodded. "We think she escaped through one of the old furnace tunnels." The camera feeds went dark at 5:43 a.m., 2 minutes before the power surge. No footprints, no body. I looked past him at the fading horizon. "She's too good at disappearing. Always was." Grant sighed. "We'll keep looking. The higher-ups want to bury this, but there are too many witnesses now. Between your testimony and the lab evidence, Elysian's finished." He paused, then added quietly, "I heard your son took a plea deal." The words cut, but I didn't flinch. He should have. He'll serve time, 3 years minimum. Cooperation and remorse go a long way. "Remorse," I repeated. "That's something." Grant closed the folder. "You did good, Harlan. Most people would have walked away when it got dangerous." I gave a faint smile. "You get old enough, you stop caring about danger. You just care about finishing what's been started." He clapped my shoulder and headed to his car. "Get some rest. You've earned it." When his taillights disappeared, I went back inside. Juniper was at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in her hands. She looked up and smiled. "Detective still on the hunt?" "Always." She hesitated, studying my face. "You still think she's out there, don't you?" "Yes," I said simply. "And I think she's not done." Juniper nodded slowly. "Then neither are we." Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat by the old window where the moonlight spilled across the floor. The quiet was different now, less empty, more fragile. I thought about Keaton, his first baseball game. The way he used to run to me after striking out, tears in his eyes, saying, "I'll do better next time, Dad." Somewhere along the line, life taught him that failure had to be hidden, not fixed. I tried to show him otherwise. Maybe I hadn't tried hard enough. I pulled the folded photograph from my pocket, the one that had come in the letter. Juniper and Sable, standing in front of my old house. Only now, under the lamplight, I noticed something I hadn't before. In the far corner of the picture, reflected in the window pane behind them, there was a third figure. A man, face blurred but tall, watching. I traced the outline with my thumb. Whoever he was, he'd been there from the start. The phone rang, snapping me back. I answered, half expecting Grant. But the voice on the other end wasn't his. "Mr. Pierce," a woman said softly. "This is Dr. Adissa from the state hospital. Your son asked me to call you." My chest tightened. "Keaton? Is he all right?" "He's fine physically," she said. "But he's been having vivid dreams. Repetitive imagery, machines, corridors, a woman with red hair. He insists she's talking to him. Her name is Sable." The world went still. "What did she say?" I asked. Dr. Adissa hesitated. He said she told him, "Tell your father it isn't over. Tell him Eden isn't a place. It's a plan." The line went dead. I sat there, the phone cold in my hand, the night pressing in from all sides. Out in the distance, thunder rolled again over the fields, low and steady, like something waking up beneath the earth. I went to Juniper's room. She was asleep, her sketchbook open beside her. On the page, she'd drawn the old factory, but rebuilt, gleaming, perfect. Above it, in bold, careful letters, she'd written one word: Eden. I closed the book quietly and looked out the window. The storm was coming back. And this time, I knew exactly what it was. Not vengeance. Not justice. Continuation. Because sometimes evil doesn't die, it adapts. And sometimes, the only thing standing in its way is an old man with too many ghosts and nothing left to lose. I poured a cup of coffee loaded my truck with the flashlight and the revolver, and watched the sky split open in lightning. Round 2. I murmured to myself. Then I drove into the storm. If this story gripped your heart, don't stop here. Harlan's journey reminds us that age doesn't dull courage, and that family secrets can be darker than any storm. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Tell me in the comments below. And if you want to see what happens when Harlan tracks down the true mastermind behind Eden, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Stay with me, because the next chapter isn't just a sequel. It's a reckoning.